Hi, I'm Jacqueline Isaacs, also known as the Unsmug Mum, and jacquelineisaacs.co.uk, and as promised at the end of my last video, I'm going to briefly talk about today where it is that I went wrong, because as some of you know, I have had a blog before. It was a typewritten blog. I ended up knocking it on the head because it was just taking up too much of my time. Whereas this obviously is a much speedier delivery, and I can include mistakes to my heart's content. Sorry. So where did I go wrong? Because as some of you know, I've known a lot of this sciencey stuff for quite a while, but still managed to put on weight. So what happened there? Well, obviously there are separate factors other than food to take into account, and I am a sucker for emotional eating, so there is that side of things. You know, I do have to acknowledge that I was eating my emotions, but how was I doing it? So I was consuming more starches and sugars than I normally would, and obviously, as we know, if I just get my lovely high-tech prop again, starch is pretty much sugar. Starch is a polysaccharide, many sugars, and it only takes water, alphabet, to turn it into its simple sugars to separate the bonds between these guys. So it pretty much is as fast as sugar in terms of absorption. So I was being a bit lazy with myself, and I was being a bit lazy with my food, and so I was getting more and more heavily reliant on the substitute gluten-free products, because I can't really handle gluten very well. So but you know, they're no different from normal wheat products. It's just that they don't have gluten. It's that they use other starches instead. So they're still starch, you know, still the same thing, still going to reduce down to sugar and go through really, really quickly. So I was probably eating a bit more chocolate and a bit more of that than I normally would. But that doesn't account for all of it. There was another thing, obviously the very first video, the thing that really kicked all this off, alcohol. I do like a drop of wine or similar, you know, or a gluten-free beer or something. Now what happened there wasn't that I was necessarily consuming tons more alcohol. In fact, right at the beginning when I started losing weight, I started taking note of the calorie side of things, the calorie side of alcohol. What I didn't realise until quite recently is that the real impact came not from the extra calories, the extra glasses of wine that I might have been having. It came from frequency. And what I mean from that, if you've watched my very first very shaky video, is that alcohol stops us processing any other form of energy whilst alcohol is in the system. Because alcohol is such, the body can use it as a form of energy. It's a very specific type of energy that is very inefficient for the body. The body doesn't like this energy, this alcohol energy, very much, so it wants to get rid of it. So it wants to use that and prioritise it above all else. So what happens there is, if you imagine having alcohol alongside your dinner, which usually is the time of day you end up having it, you're not going to process any of that energy from that dinner whilst you've got alcohol in your system, because your body is going to prioritise the alcohol. What happens to the rest of it? Storage. What storage? Fat. So what happens is that if you're having alcohol every single night alongside your dinner, it's probable, from what I've obviously discovered, that those dinners will just go into fat storage, which isn't great. Let's face it, well, especially not when you're trying to manage or lose or maintain your weight. So all I did there was, I still like a drink, but whereas I'd previously gone from having a drink on my maybe my Fridays and my Saturdays, my weekends, and it had slowly crept to Thirsty Thursday and then over to Wednesday, and it was getting more and more across the week. Obviously, I was storing more of those dinners. So, you know, first step, frequency, cut that back. I was actually better off with a pudding, because at least then my body would process the energy in my dinner. So yeah, that was one of the simple stops I made. So there was those things to consider. But I also made an error judgment, and I kind of got a bit confused. It's so much information really when it comes to food, nutrition. I mean, it's no wonder these things, you know, to be a nutritionist you have to do major degrees and really delve into like the biology, biochemistry side of things. It's complicated stuff, and there's a lot to bear in mind. And obviously every single one of us is different, and so there's a lot to try and keep up here. So unfortunately for me, I kept the bits up there that led me to my mistake, and I will explain. So I will re-upload. I actually edited this when I uploaded the picture of it yesterday, my lovely gut drawing. This is the one where I labelled about the starches and sugars and that they're quickly digested in the mouth. And obviously we know the difference now between that and fibre. What I have previously mentioned in my historical blog was that we have heard of protein, right? I used to call protein pebbles, and I used to call starch and sugars sand, and I used to visualise the starches and sugars as being like sand for a sieve. So our gut being like the sieve, obviously, and the sand, the sugary, starchy sand shooting through really fast, unimpeded, right? So then I used to call things like protein, which is takes a lot longer, it's a lot harder for our body to digest, which is why there's this big recent thing towards staying fuller for longer, usually protein containing meals, because I used to call protein the pebbles because they needed to be ground down, worked at before they could be digested. So they hang around in the stomach. Protein hangs around in the stomach for longer, which is great for keeping us fuller for longer. And it seems bizarre sometimes to me that these feelings such as hunger is actually a hormone. Seems bizarre, but there we are. Hunger, the feeling of hunger, is actually a hormone called ghrelin. And I call it grumbly ghrelin, so it's easy to remember. Grumbly belly, grumbly ghrelin is at work. And obviously, if you've got something in your stomach and it stays in your stomach for a while, it's going to shut that guy up. It's going to shut grumbly ghrelin up, basically. So protein's great for shutting up grumbly ghrelin and putting a stop to our hunger hormone. Yeah, satiating him, shutting him up for a little while. Then healthy fat. I knew healthy fat. I called him, I don't know if I called him a pebble, but, alongside, I didn't consider fat in the same way as I regarded sugar and starches, because we need healthy fat. Fat's good. And fat, very importantly, whilst it might not hang in our stomach for as long as protein, so it makes it to the intestines at least. It's not quite like sugar and starches up here in the mouth. You've got protein stomach, then you've got the fat gets through to our intestines, our sieve or our series of plug holes, if you like. Goes up into the body in a completely different way to starches and sugars, which it needs to be. That's a whole different topic in its own right. But what it does do, I think you can see written on here, is it triggers another hormone. Again, I find it weird that these feelings, like feeling satisfied, is a hormone. There we go. Hormone called leptin is our satiety hormone. It's the thing that makes us feel satisfied. And so we need some fat in our meals to trigger the release of leptin that helps us feel satisfied. Now, this is where I began to go wrong. Now, obviously, I'm not taking into account if you've got a metabolic disease to think of, because our sensitivity to leptin and insulin and that gets a bit screwed up. So I'm talking bog standard here. Okay, let's not get too complicated. So I knew that protein was like a pebble, took longer to grind down, and I knew healthy fat was going to, so protein was going to shut up grumbly ghrelin, and I knew healthy fat was going to make it to the intestines and make me feel satisfied. And I knew fibre was necessary to help reduce my appetite, so I always made sure I ate a little bit of fibre. But what I made the mistake of confusing was that these pebbles, like my protein pebbles that was going to keep me fuller for longer, I mistakenly had it in my head for some reason that was also going to slow down my starches and sugars, and I think I probably even said so in my blog. Remembering all my previous videos, what is it that slows down starches and sugars? Our hairy, porridgey plug hole sticks down a stream, yeah? So, I mean, if we imagine that our stomach is that sink that I mentioned in the previous video, and we put a pebble in there, unless that pebble is like completely smothered the plug hole, so let's assume that it's just a little bit to the side, the sand is still going to shoot through. You put one pebble into a sieve and pour a load of sand on top of it, I imagine there's still quite a lot of sand that's going to get through. Especially if you jiggle it around a bit, all the sand will go through. The pebble might remain, keeping you fuller for longer, but the sand's still going to shoot through. Yeah, good image to keep up there, because that is what I forgot. So what I'd started doing, I'd started overeating on my proteins and fats, because I had it up here, sugar and starch need slowing down. Knew that. Sugar and starch, must always consume them with protein and fat. So yes, my main meals should consist of protein, healthy fat, some sort of sugar or starch and fibre. Yes, fine. But then I also was making sure that my snacks also contained the protein and the healthy fat and so forth. My calories, my daily calories were totting up, and I was overeating on the protein and the fats, because I would think to myself, right, banana, I'll have a banana as a snack, but really I need to have some protein and healthy fat with that, so I'll have seeds as well. I could have quite happily had the seeds on their own, but no, I thought I'll have the banana and the seeds as well to help slow down the banana, forgetting that it was the fibre that I needed to really think about, yeah? Or maybe I'd think, okay, I'm going to have some fruit as a snack, I want to slow down those sugars, forgetting the fibre, and I'll have an egg with that, because I mean, I must admit, I still do. I have a stock of hard-boiled eggs as a healthy snack, but I'll maybe just have an egg on its own. I won't combine it with lots of other snacks. Otherwise, you're basically creating 6 meals a day, which ain't so great. So there we have it. That is where I went wrong. And so the important thing to take away here, I took my eye off the fibre ball, the Mother Nature's packaging. I forgot about that bit. And my hairy porridgey plug holes is obviously a recent invention to help our visual imagery, to help take this information in. So I was thinking pebbles in a sieve is going to stop my sand getting through. No, porridgey hairy plug holes, that's what we want. Have a good day, guys. I hope that was helpful.